College campuses across the country have erupted with pro-Palestinian protests, and school administrators are attempting to, but largely failing to defuse the situation. Joining us now on Good Day at 4 is an expert on media and trust, Scott Baradell. Joining us, he's the author of Trust Signals, Brand Building in a Post-Truth World. Scott, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So this story has been headlines for weeks at this time. Could you break down these protests? They look different than what people would expect.
Well, they're certainly different from protests in the past. I think a lot of it has to do with the climate we're in today. You can't please everyone in 2024. I think the campuses where they've had the most problems and where the college presidents have had the most problems have been where they've tried to please everyone as opposed to stating clear values, clear guidelines, and lines in the sand as to what is allowed and not allowed.
So in hindsight, how could, in your opinion, the leaders of these colleges and universities perhaps have handled these situations differently?
Well, I think it's all about communicating, both with the public and with the students and the protesters right up front and frequently. You know, in the case of Columbia, which has been cited as probably the worst example because they're criticized by all sides now, first as not doing enough, and then as doing too much when the police were brought in, when buildings were broken into and damage was caused. And what a lot of people don't realize is, you know, that campus was shut down for 6 days before the president of Columbia even issued a statement. That's, you know, that's a void, and in a void is where chaos happens. In other cases, Ben Sass at the University of Florida or at the University of Chicago, University of Texas, these were places where the rules were put out there and it was said, if you don't follow them, this is what's going to happen.
Of course, hindsight 2020, of course. But what would your message be to perhaps universities in this situation? And then after that, what would a message be to people with the intent to protest something that they're unhappy with?
Well, in the case of universities, you know, you have to communicate early and often. And I think in the case of college presidents, you know, they're so close to the students and the faculty, they're in proximity on campus. They often forget that their biggest audience and most important is probably the parents and the donors, and they're often left in the dark. A part of the problem with these protests, which are a little different from many protests in the past, is that the studies have shown there's a pretty large percentage of the people at these protests that are not at all associated with the universities where they're protesting. They're not students, they're not, they don't have any connection. And so I think students have an obligation to separate themselves from the people who are coming in and maybe don't have the university's best interests at heart. Because you want to believe that if you're a student there, yes, you want to make a protest, but you're not trying to burn your own house down. And you're also likely not the ones who are making anti-Semitic comments and doing the things that are really making the protesters look bad. And so a lot of that it has to start with a little self-policing. So you're going to put the best face to the public on your protests. And then I think you have to have an objective that's realistic.
Scott, where can we go for more information on any projects you're working on?
Well, I have a book that came out not too long ago called Trust Signals, and that touches on issues like this for companies and all organizations that are dealing with how you secure trust in such a polarized world, and all the missteps that can happen. I also have an agency called Idea Grove that does PR and marketing, and deals with reputation issues like this all the time.
Scott Baradell, thanks so much for joining us on Good Day at 4.
Thank you for having me.